Hey everybody, welcome back to Tim Travels. It's Terry, your host. So I'm coming to you from the global corporate headquarters of Prime Inc. here in Springfield, Missouri. I thought I would be long gone from here by now. It's about 12:30. So I came here yesterday. I came here the day before yesterday, and then yesterday I had a class I needed to do. And I spoke out of turn because, after all of the requests and everything, and I thought we were good to go, they're like, oh yeah, that trainee that you thought you would get on your truck, who thought she was getting on your truck, yeah, we're gonna have to go through the whole process, which means it's unlikely that I'll get a trainee anytime soon. I mean, I'm kind of down to not even like asking or trying anymore. If I recruit somebody, like if somebody uses my driver code on their application, then I'll be able to do their training. But if they weren't like my referral or like, a family member, friend, whatever, probably not going to happen. So little not happy with that. I mean, I'll just make it work. It doesn't make much sense to me, but I can't do anything about it. It's kind of serenity prayer thing. So the other reason, well, that's not the reason I'm still here. So I did my class, and I got a load, and it was a load that was being brought here to the yard, and then it goes from here to Blue Ash, Ohio, which is, if you know where, it's just north of Cincinnati off of the 71. The cool thing about the load is it pays like $3.13 a mile. The problem was that the plan I had to get there was not the plan that other people had, except the other people who had a different plan didn't bother to tell me, because I was like, about 3 o'clock in the morning, I got up, did my pre-trip. I was already latched to the trailer, had already, completely hooked up. I do my pre-trip, head over to outbound. I get in outbound, I pull up on the scale because, hadn't had the trailer on my back yet. I go into driver lineup to pick up the bills, and they're like, yeah, that trailer is on hold. It has to go to the shop. And I'm like, what the F, like, why didn't anybody tell me? Because I told dispatch I had the trailer on my back, So anyway, I had to bring the trailer back, drop the trailer, and then they finished the trailer about, 45 minutes ago. But my 10-hour break is up in about an hour and a half, so I'm just going to stay and finish my 10, leave out with a completely fresh clock, although I only use like 15 minutes of my clock anyway. But I'll get it there on time. But it just irksome because, I had a plan. And I said to my fleet manager, hey, we always talk about communication and everything. I said, what about communication to the drivers? And by the way, there's no driver that won't, affirm that, or corroborate. We can use that word. That's even bigger word than affirm. That, we send messages all the time that don't get replied to. But then if they want to tell you something, they want you to acknowledge it. And I'm like, what the hell, Dispatch obviously didn't know. It's like there's no communication. They knew I was on the load, and my fleet manager's like, well, you're gonna have to call driver lineup to find out those things. And I'm like, those guys are sitting over there, especially in the middle of the night, You know, there was nobody else around, not any other trucks around. And, you know, they could have sent me a message or called me and said, hey man, just FYI, your trailer needs to be, you know, fixed before you leave. Because I would have never hooked up to it either. You know, I'd have let, because obviously they need to move it. But anyway, so that happened. Today's May 3rd, or as I like to say, Cinco de Mayo Eve. Or maybe it would be Noche. I don't think that's the right word, but anyway, May 3rd. So on this day in 1898, this lady named Golda Meir was born in Kiev, Ukraine, 1898. And at the time, Ukraine was part of the Russian Empire. There was no Soviet Union at that point. I think Nicholas the First, somebody who's really up on Russian history could correct me in that. I think Nicholas the First was still the king. He was later murdered, assassinated, and his son Nicholas II, who was the guy you see with his family and, you know, was all involved with Rasputin. He, Nicholas II, then became king. And by the way, yesterday was the birthday of Catherine II, also known as Catherine the Great, Empress of Russia. I didn't talk about her because I didn't do a video yesterday, but it's just kind of interesting. And by the way, if you're at all interested in Russian history, and why wouldn't you be, I could recommend one name, and if you read his books, you will know way more about Russian history than almost anybody else. As Robert K. Massie. Massie is spelled M-A-S-S-I-E. He's like a specialist in Russian history. He wrote the book Nicholas and Alexandra, who was, and that's referring to Nicholas II, who I just mentioned. And he also wrote Catherine the Great, which is on my bookshelf at home, and which I've read. And he's good. He's a good author. He makes history interesting. The books are very, very detailed though, so it's not something you're going to read in one day. But anyway, Robert K. Massie, I recommend his books. So Golda Meir would eventually become the 4th Prime Minister of Israel. She was Prime Minister from 1969, I think, until 1974, somewhere around there. I know she was Prime Minister when I was a kid. And she was also Prime Minister during the 1973 war. Interesting woman. And you know, when I was thinking about Golda Meir, I was thinking about all the countries around the world that have had female heads of state. And not just democracies, right? Like not just like England or, you know, New Zealand or Finland or all these countries that have had women heads of state, but even countries where it's really a male-dominated society have still had women heads of state. Like Pakistan has had a woman head of state. Her name was Benazir Bhutto. Of course, they murdered her, but it happens, right? India, Indira Gandhi was the Prime Minister of India. Again, and they murdered her too. But it happens. You know, so there a lot of countries have had women heads of state, and yet we haven't cracked into that thing yet, and you know, that status yet. And I'm just concerned. Of course, Angela Merkel was the Chancellor of Germany for like a long time. You know, she really was the kind of head of Europe, if you will. I mean, she had a lot of impressive accomplishments. But here's the thing: I fear that we're just on a freaking rinse and repeat cycle here. You know, like we've had one guy in, you know, 200 and what are we at? 200 some odd years, 230 years of our nation, right? We've had one guy that didn't look like the rest, right? one guy that was slightly darker. Like, he wasn't all the way black. He's half white, right? It's so incremental, right? But we had one guy that didn't look like the rest. But everybody else has basically been an old white guy. I mean, Clinton wasn't really that old. John F. Kennedy wasn't really that old. But then, he got murdered. It happens. But my point is that we're going to have an election next year, and it wouldn't shock me that it's just a couple of old white men again. And I'm an old white man, but I'm like, I would like to see somebody that doesn't look like an old white man being either party's major candidate, and especially getting into the White House. I mean, I think we could all agree that there are people that aren't old white men that could do the job. And if you don't think that, I don't know what to say, but I think you're wrong. So anyway, that's just my semi-political lament. Also on this day, 1903, Bing Crosby was born. Bing Crosby. Who else was born on this day? 1933, James Brown, the godfather of soul, was born on this day. Let me see. I think 1921, Sugar Ray Robinson was born. Sorry about the glare. Yeah. Can't fix it. Oh no. There we go. Sugar Ray Robinson was born. He was a boxer, world champ. Very impressive. So, not Sugar Ray Leonard, Sugar Ray Robinson. Who else was born on this day? Trying to think. I think Pete Seeger, who's also a singer, he was born in I think 1919 on this day. So anyway, it's a little bit of ranting about too many old white men running things. Okay, so somebody asked me about, one of my biggest fans asked me about the A-Fleet. By the way, I'm wearing my Tim Travels t-shirt. This is one of the older ones that my daughter's made, and it's still hanging in there. And I wear it because for some reason I don't get a lot of Tim Travels love while I'm here in Springfield. A few people, but not as many as you think. A lot more. I meet a lot more people that say like hi to me and genuflect and stuff when I'm in like Salt Lake City or like even Minooka. So anyway, I don't have a big following here in Missouri. I am huge in parts of Belgium though, mostly the Flemish-speaking parts of Belgium. Anyway, somebody asked me about the A-Fleet. You hear my engine beeping because I'm actually idling right now. So there are trailers outside my truck running loudly, probably my own. A-Fleet is part of, okay, so talk about Prime a little bit. So Prime everybody knows Prime has company drivers. Everybody knows Prime has lease operators and lease purchasers. All of those three categories of people run under Prime's authority, okay? And when I say authority, I mean their motor carrier number. A-Fleet, and within that group, people that are, say, lease purchasers, like my good buddy Lyle, they can own, small, what they call small fleets, mini fleets. That's why I call Lyle a fleet admiral, even though he was a Marine. He's a fleet admiral because he has a fleet of trucks. And there's no set size. Some people have, 3 trucks like Lyle. Some people have 10 trucks, 20 trucks, but they all still are small fleet owners. They run under Prime's authority. The A-Fleet is really not, I mean, it is a fleet, but a lot of them are just individually owned trucks. And there are people, in fact, there's a guy that I met, who, Jake is his name. He's a retired Navy chief like me, although he's a young whippersnapper. He is in the A-Fleet. And, you know, I talked to him, and so A-fleeters, they have their own operating authority. So what does that mean? Well, they can they pay their own insurance, so they don't necessarily have to run 65 miles an hour, you know, or whatever Prime says their speed limit is. They do participate in a lot of the advantages of Prime, but again, they pay their own insurance. They have to take care of their own IFTA tax audits and stuff like that, although Jake said it's not that hard. He just does it once a quarter. They tend to make more money because Prime is providing them with less services, like the insurance, like the IFTA audits, etc. They do use Prime facilities. I met Jake when he was getting some work done in the tire shop here in Springfield. One of the and he had been a lease owner, and if he wants to comment, he's welcome to, and you know, maybe fill in some more of the blanks. But he said he went to A-Fleet because he wanted somebody to run with him, wanted somebody to be his co-driver and team with him, but that person was not eligible for hire at Prime. And you know, I will say that lots of people, for really kind of random reasons, might not be eligible for hire at Prime. And in fact, I could tell you that there were a couple of companies when I was originally going through the hiring process, like a little over 4 years ago now, because I've had my CDL 4 years. But excuse me. But when I was going through the hiring process, because they ask questions like, "Oh, have you had an accident or whatever," right? And me being like coming from practicing the law, I was like, "Well, I'm gonna answer all the questions with extensive detail, right? Like I'm gonna get into the minutia because that's what I do." And so I talked about an accident that I actually had where a tow truck freaking sideswiped me, and really he came into me on the left side of my little Honda Civic on purpose, actually, because he thought I would move, although I didn't have anywhere to go because it was like rush hour traffic, and he just like ripped off my mirror and tore up my car. But the funny thing was, I listed that accident, and but I wasn't at fault. I got because one of my kids was with me. She was just hanging out with me for the day. We got I settled the case for like $8,000, right? But anyway, the police came because I called them because the truck driver was so freaking belligerent, and some people stopped and they're like, "Damn, he just came right over into you," and anyway. So I listed the accident, and they're like, "Okay, we need a police report." And I'm like, "There is no police report." Because even though the police came, all they did was an exchange of information form, right? Because cops don't want to do police reports at accident scenes when there's not some major injuries or fatalities. And the reason they don't is because they don't want to have to get subpoenaed to go testify in civil court if there's going to be a lawsuit. So, that is very common practice in almost every state. Police are just like, "All right, get the car out of the travel lanes, exchange information, be on your way," right? They don't want to get involved, really. And so I tried to explain that to a couple of trucking companies, and they're like, "No, there has to be a police report." I'm like, "No, there doesn't." And, and I even went so far as to kind of play the lawyer card and say, "Look, I'm an attorney in the state that this happened in. There's not police reports on a vast majority of accidents, right? People getting rear enders, fender benders, whatever you want to say, all the time in the DC and Baltimore area, right? There's tons of traffic. There's accidents constantly. The cops there's not even enough cops to go to all the accidents, right? They're like, if nobody's hurt or killed, just exchange information. I've been hit I've been hit several times over the years. You know, we just exchange information, you know. My insurance company tells their insurance company to pay for fixing my car or whatever. So anyway, I had at least 2 companies that they just could not wrap their head around it. And even after I got a letter from my insurance company saying that I was not at fault and that I had received compensation, a settlement from the other party, right? They're like, no, we got to have a police report. I'm like, all right, I don't know what to do about this. So that's why I didn't get hired by some companies, because they refused to hire me because that was their policy. So getting back to the guy I was talking about, he decided that he wanted to have somebody that's close to him running with him, but that person wasn't eligible for hire for whatever reason. And so he just bought his truck and went A-Fleet. He didn't change carriers. He has a dispatcher. He runs like I do, basically, but he just gets paid more. He gets paid more for the reasons I said. But as far as like his schedule, refusing loads, I'm sure he can do all the same things I could do. He just has a little less of a, what I would call a safety net. So for instance, when I broke down back in January, I got breakdown pay because I'm not an owner. So like if an owner or an A-Fleeter breaks down, tough, they're just out of luck, right? Like they don't get paid for the days they're down or whatever. So that's basically what A-Fleet is. I still consider A-Fleeters like one of us, if you will. I mean, and by the way, if you know of like Wilson, I think Wilson could be defined as an A-Fleet. They run under their own authority. They handle their own recruiting. So like, for instance, Prime might not hire a driver, but Wilson would. And then if that Wilson driver screws up, you know, then Wilson's on the hook for it. Because like I said, they have their own operating authority. They have their own, you know, they have their own CSA score. They have their own insurance and everything. Now, Wilson might actually take care of even more than Prime does with the smaller A-Fleeters. But they're essentially, you know, an A-Fleeter, a contractor to Prime that has their own authority. So anyway, you know, Jake, if you're out there, if you're watching, if you can clear up any mysteries, or if I've left anything out or gotten anything wrong, I don't usually like to talk about stuff that I'm not like super certain about, but and I know some people would be like, well, you don't know shit about a lot of things, but hopefully that helps. And you know, if somebody wants to come over and be an A-Fleet, I mean, I guess they need to just talk to Prime. And by the way, you can, like, there is a section on the website where you can call them and talk to them about A-Fleet. So anyway, be safe. I will talk to you soon. Bye.